Hey guys, Jake here from Kinetic Mechanics, and today we're going to be talking about how to reset the hip. Now in the eyes on movement approach, the first eye is basically to identify. So we want to identify what we're working with. The scenario we're going with is an average training client who has a desk job where they're sitting 40, 50, 60 hours of the week. They go home, they sit down, they play with their kids a little bit, they answer emails, they eat dinner, they watch TV. So they're basically in a seated position all day long. And what this affects, the two structures we're going to focus on are fascia, which we'll go into a little bit more in depth in another video, but the fascia and the muscle spindles. The muscle spindles are basically stretch receptors in the muscle. And what they do is that they're in constant communication with the brain to tell us when to initiate the stretch reflex in response to the stretching of the muscle, and to basically brace our body to make sure we don't go too far too fast. And unfortunately what happens is that when we put a muscle into a shortened position versus a lengthened position, we change that response time. We change that threshold of how quickly that stretch reflex kicks in. So when we're looking at like muscles here, the ones that we're going to identify today are basically rectus femoris, which crosses the hip and the knee. It's the only quad muscle that does so. The sartorius muscle and TFL, which becomes the IT band and crosses the knee here. So when we come back, like right now in a neutral position, everything's good to go. But when a person is seated, again, for 40, 50, 60 hours, we have a muscle that crosses the hip and the knee. At the hip, that muscle is going to be really shortened. So the threshold is going to be a lot smaller in order for that stretch reflex to kick in, where it's going to be a lot longer at the knee. So if we're doing something like squats or deadlifts or something like that, our clients can be at a high risk if we don't basically reset these guys and get them working together in tandem. So that's how the muscle spindle plays into it. Fascia is basically, think of it right now as cotton candy that kind of binds everything together inside of the body. Now, cotton candy, if you take it and squish it like it is at the hip here, it becomes very hard to kind of pull apart, and that's going to affect the movement of the hip. Where at the knee, it becomes really kind of like frayed and thin. That also affects the structure and how well it's going to communicate with the brain and how well it's going to reactively stabilize the knee. So again, even though these muscles cross two different joints and they're at two different lengths, it's going to affect the overall quality of movement. Okay, so that's what we're going to be focusing on this series. If you have any questions, please leave comments below. Thanks.